before I roll on? You make it
Nope.
easy for me. All right. Well, hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Yes, Wednesday. And happy Social Work Month. We're so glad you are here. Congratulations also on upcoming graduation times. I am Duane Breijak. I'm the Director of Member Services at NASW-Michigan. I am a macro licensed social worker. I got my MSW from U of M in 2012, and I've been at NASW the 9 years since, which is crazy that it has been 9 years. Your professional, I still feel like I'm a student, but 9 years when I say it out loud sounds like a long time out of school. And so today what we're going to talk about is really kind of like those first steps of your social work career post-graduation. So we're going to talk about the licensure process. We're going to talk about salary negotiation. We're going to talk about student debt. We're going to talk about how to get a job, kind of all of those things that you're probably starting to think about as you get closer to graduation. If folks wouldn't mind, would you put your graduation date or anticipated graduation date into the chat box? I'll pull up my screen. So it looks like mostly April, a couple December folks. That's going to be helpful as we kind of talk about some of this process, as well as you've probably heard some information about the exam and the craziness that's coming around that. There's some good news for you April people, so we'll get to that when we talk about the exam piece. But kind of the process for how I will do these webinars is we'll talk a little bit about NASW, we'll talk about what is licensure, we'll get through that whole process of the licensure piece. And then depending on how much time we've got left, we may swing into just talking about the exam at the end. So giving you an overview about that process, maybe run through a couple sample questions if there's time. What I found, especially in a group of a pretty good size like this, is we'll probably hold off on most questions until we get through at least the licensure process, and then we'll open up the floor for folks to get anything specifically answered that you want. There may be a couple of things that I do, I'm going to ask earlier than that, but feel free to, if you have questions that are coming in your mind, type them into the chat box, and then we will get to them, or just hold off and then wait till we get to questions, and if they haven't been answered, then we can bring them up. So I did just want to quickly mention before we get rolling that we are doing a giveaway. If you are not an NASW member, we want you to join. For the month of March, we're doing kind of the graduation packet giveaway. So if you join in March, you're going to be entered to win a licensure prep course, which we're offering May 2nd, a graduation cord, and a professional social worker pin. So just a little extra incentive to get joined before graduation. But a little bit about NASW. So if you aren't familiar with us, you've probably heard of the Code of Ethics. That comes from our national organization, but we are the largest organization for social workers in the world. We have about 115,000 members across the US and internationally. And when you join NASW, you actually get a dual membership into a state chapter and into the national chapter. So for any of you who are on the line, if you are potentially thinking of moving after graduation, or if you just end up moving after graduation, one of the things as it relates to licensure is the process is going to be a little bit different in every state. What we talk about here today is going to generally apply across the board. There's going to be an application. You're going to have to get fingerprinted and show your transcripts. There's going to be some sort of work and test requirements, but the timing, the letters after your name, the amount of money is all going to vary a little bit state to state. So my recommendation is if you are planning to move to a different state, make sure to contact the NASW chapter in that state. If you're a member saying, hey, I'm in Michigan now, but I'm moving to Ohio after graduation, can you point me in the right direction for the licensure process there? Because we want to make sure that you're on the right track wherever you end up going. If you're thinking of potentially doing any sort of global work, that's kind of a whole different ball of wax as it relates to licensing. Social work looks very different in different countries. And so NASW also has an international chapter you can connect with. But We could connect offline if you have more specific questions about international work. And one of the things when I was a student transitioning into the field, and I think that this is, I hear from pretty much everybody, is one of the hardest things is going from being surrounded regularly by a cohort of people who are in all different areas of social work practice. You know, if we had the time today and talked to everybody who's on this call, I bet we would have 50 different areas of social work practice, or 50 different types of clients people were interested in, or 50 different areas of advocacy that you're all passionate about. Once you're in the field, it gets much more tailored, right? You're going to find your area, your niche of social work. You're likely going to be surrounded by that sort of social worker, whether it's school social work or hospital social work, or maybe private practice work or macro work. And a lot of times you're not hearing and connected to that information about what's going on in those additional areas of social work. So one of the benefits I see early on in your career of getting connected to, whether it's NASW or another social work group, is really keeping your social work network large. You know, half of your job title that everybody on this call has signed up for the rest of your life is social. I am an introvert in an extrovert job. I'm guessing many of you probably feel the same way in your social work life. You got to turn it on, you got to present, right? We got to talk to people. But being a social worker means we have to know our resources, right? And part of that is knowing your resources internally within the field. So who are those colleagues that are going to help you find your job, be an advocacy partner, right? And as students at Eastern, I'm guessing that most of you have at least networked with your cohort. You know your faculty, you know your folks at your internship, but outside of that, how big is your social work network? And when we think about the state of Michigan, we have about 29,000 licensed social workers in the state of Michigan alone. And we also have about 6,500 social work students. So if I was going to ask you, how many social work students do you know outside of Eastern Michigan University? And if your answer is none, which I would guess that's probably going to be true for a good chunk of you, what I would say is you have, well, April's next month. So you've got a little bit of time to start getting to know other people outside of your program. Because when we think about that first job out of social work school, when you talk to people and ask social workers, how did you get into your position? Most of the time, it's not, I went online and found it on a job search engine. It's, I knew somebody in the field who referred me to this position, or I volunteered at this organization and they had a position open up. You know, it's that, again, that social part of our field that is so critical, especially right out of school. So starting to build your social work network outside of even EMU, because I'm guessing for many of you, you're going to end up moving to different parts of the state, or you might already live in different parts of the state. So starting to get connected to folks in that area. The other things that you're going to want to make sure that you're keeping up to date with as you enter the professional space is news and updates about the field, right? We've got changes coming to the social work general rules, which is going to impact our continuing education. It's going to impact our telehealth abilities. And so making sure that wherever you are after graduation, that you are surrounded by accurate information and people who can provide you accurate information about what's going on in social work world. Because as a student, I know when I was a student, I got emails all the time from my program, you know, several a day, usually with either jobs or updates or things going on at the university. Those go away, at least they did for me after I graduated from U of M. And so finding another way to stay connected to that information. And sometimes that's advocacy related. NASW, we do political advocacy, we do endorsements, we try to get social workers to run for office. We do trainings around political advocacy. We do ethics and legal guidance, lots of stuff that is going to relate to what happens once you enter the professional space. But you're here to learn about licensing, so let's switch gears a little bit into that. So in Michigan, we were the second to last state in the US to get a licensure law passed. And we did not get licensure until 2005. At that point, you could be registered as a social worker, but it was not protected as a license in the state. And so in 2005, we got three things as it related to licensure. The actual physical license that allows you to practice. You'll get a nice little certificate in the mail. It gave us a defined scope of practice, which basically is what can I do with my degree after graduation? And it gave us title protection. So title protection means you have to be licensed to be able to call yourself or work as a social worker. Before 2005, anyone in the state of Michigan could call themselves a social worker, even without a degree in social work, or at that point, we didn't have a license either. So one of the things I would guess many of you on this call, maybe not many of you, but I would guess at least some of you on this call know of people in your circles that are not social workers. Either they're not in the social work program, don't have a social work degree, and definitely don't have a social work license that use the title social worker. Feel free to use this webinar and blame Duane at NASW and say, hey, did you know that's actually a felony misrepresentation to be calling yourself that? You know, their job title might be case manager or some other position, right? But it's not social work. And so we want to make sure that as we have this professional title now, that it's protected for a reason. And the reason is it protects our clients. So if a client goes to see somebody who's a social worker, right, that has a set of standards behind it. It means you've went to an accredited school of social work, you've worked in the field for a couple of years under supervision, and you've passed a standardized test. Very similar to like if you go to a medical doctor, I mean, we don't often ask for our doctor's license, right? We assume, and we're on good faith, that they actually went to medical school and passed the boards, right? And so it's the same thing with our field. You all are going to be licensed health professionals in a matter of weeks, really, which is really exciting. So before you really apply for your license, there's a couple of things that you want to ask. I can't remember, is this group mostly bachelor's level or mostly master's level?
Bachelor's.
Bachelor's. Okay. So for the bachelor's folks, really the question is when or if you're getting your MSW degree. If you're going right into an MSW program in the fall, you're likely not going to need to get your LLBSW. Because once you start your MSW program, none of the hours during that placement count towards your LLBSW. However, if you plan to work a job, a social work job on top of your master's degree internship, then you may need to apply for your limited license at the bachelor's level. If you're planning to take a year or two off in between a bachelor's and a master's degree, then the question really is, what are you doing in that in-between time? Are you planning to gather social work experience, or are you just kind of working in a hodgepodge job to give yourself either a mental break or a financial break for that year or two? I know in between my undergrad and grad school, I worked at my apartment complex. I would not have needed to have a limited license at the bachelor's level to do that sort of work. So it may not make sense depending on what that gap time is going to look like. If you're going to take some time off and you don't know if you're going to get your MSW, but you know you're going to work under your BSW degree right out of school, then absolutely you're going to want to get your limited license right out of school. For the master's folks who we may have on the call, this process that we talked about today is going to be the same regardless if you're limited license at the bachelor's or the master's level. And then the other thing we talked about is if you're staying in Michigan or not. Like I mentioned, every state's going to have slightly different rules and regulations around the licensure process. So just know what it looks like in the state that you're planning to get licensed in. If you end up moving midway through a licensure process, say you've gotten started some hours here in Michigan, and then you move to North Carolina or wherever, you're just going to want to make sure that you have the right documentation to transfer whatever hours or supervision or test potentially to that other state. So in Michigan, we have three licensing types: the associate's degree, the bachelor's degree, and the master's degree. And really, for most of you on this call, you're gonna want, if you're getting your bachelor's degree license right out of school, you're gonna want that LLBSW after your name, the limited license bachelor's of social work. And then the ideal will be to go and drop one of the L's and be fully licensed, so the LBSW. For any MSW folks on the call, we have two options in Michigan for the master's level, the clinical or the macro. You do have to choose one of those initially out of school, And that is based off of what work you're doing right out of school. So whatever your first job is, if it's more of a macro job, you'll get the macro license. If it's more of a clinical position, you'll get the clinical license. And so what will happen is you will, actually, before I move on to kind of the steps, so these are the letters that you're going to want as soon as you get your limited license to add on to your signature line, to your resumes, to your cover letters, because for many organizations, especially if they're hiring a social worker, you have to have the degree and the license in order to call yourself or work in that position. So if you're finding yourself applying for jobs, say now for you April graduates, some of you probably are starting to apply. You may want to put in your cover letter or resume, you know, I will be graduating at the end of April. I will be applying for my limited license. And by the time that I'm hired into this particular position, I will have my limited license. Because the goal for you all right now is to at least get an interview, even if you don't have the credentials yet. So hopefully by the time that whole process is done, you'll be all set to go. But these are the letters that you're going to want after your name right after school. In Michigan, there are a couple of key organizations you need to know about as it relates to the licensure process. The number one is LARA, Licensing and Regulatory Affairs. LARA is our licensing board in the state of Michigan. So they are the folks you go to apply for your limited license or your full license. They're who you're going to send your supervision verification form to. LARA is who you're going to give money to for the rest of your professional life as you want to renew your license. And LARA is where you can also find information about the Board of Social Work. If you need to file an ethics complaint against somebody, that's all done through the state of Michigan. ASWB is the Association of Social Work Boards. ASWB are your exam people. I am very hopeful for many of you that ASWB will be a one-time relationship. You'll pass your exam on the first time and then you'll just be done with them. But ASWB, you need to know about them because you're going to have to give them $230 at the bachelor's level or $260 at the master's level to be able to take your exam. ASWB also right now on their website, which is just aswb.org, has some really good information about all of the different changes that states have made regulatorily around COVID. So especially as telehealth has opened, as some of the licensing stuff has been tweaked a little bit during the pandemic, they have a good part of their website that kind of, you can just do a drop down of what state you might be interested in learning more about around all of those changes. NASW, that's us. That's me. We do exam prep. We have a supervision registry. We do a lot of the professional advocacy, development, that sort of stuff. So we don't technically have anything to do with your license. So if you call me and say, hey, Duane, I need to renew my license, I will say, sorry, that's not me. Glad to talk to you, but let me give you the number for LARA, because they'll be the one that you have to renew through, or if your name changes or your address changes, that all has to go through them. But sometimes if you just have a quick question about the licensure piece, we're quicker and usually it can get you the information accurately. Pearson VUE, they are your testing center. So once you pay for your exam through ASWB, you will get sent a link to choose your specific site and time. That's through Pearson VUE. So really, again, that's hopefully just going to be a one-time, you're going to have to know who they are. But if you're doing the bachelor's and then move on to the master's, you may have to take both exams depending on how far in that process you get. But Pearson VUE, that's your specific site to take your exam. And then lastly, there's CSWE, that's the Council on Social Work Education. And CSWE, you all hopefully know about because you are in an accredited school of social work, which means you are almost done with step one in the licensure process already. And step one is to graduate. So for you April graduates, I can't remember, let me just pull up the chat box really quick. Can anybody tell me the specific April date that graduation is? The 25th, great. All right, so what's gonna happen as it is March 10th? For all of you April graduates who are planning to get your limited license right after graduation, I recommend in the next couple of weeks, you should go and download your application from the LARA website. You're not going to mail it in quite yet, but I'd say this is a good time to start filling it out. Take a look at it. And so as you get closer to graduation, you can already have it complete. And so 2 to 3 weeks out from graduation is when I recommend mailing in your application. So for you April 25th graduates, April 11th in your calendar or your phone, write mail in limited license application. And I'm just going to show you really quick what that looks like. So this is what LARA's website looks like. If you go, the very first thing is social worker application. And in here, you will choose which license you want. So you are getting your limited LBSW, most of you. So that's going to be, you'll fill out this 5 pages. And some of it's just information. So really it's like three pages. Yeah, 3 pages, the first 3. If you're at the MSW level, limited LMSW, you'll have to choose clinical or macro. You'll fill this out completely. And then you have to still physically mail this to LARA with a check or money order for the $43.20. But you can get this done now. You can have it filled out and ready to go. And so once it gets closer to graduation, then you can just plop it in the mail, just so you know that it's done. There is a section on here, this is a state worded thing about good moral character. It's very not social worky. If you have a criminal background, they do want to know about that. It does not automatically disqualify you from getting licensed, but what we recommend is it will kind of put a flag on your account, and then they will either ask you for further information, or what we recommend is if you do have a criminal background, that you just submit kind of a letter along with your application, just stating what it was, when was it, where it's at now. And then we also recommend submitting 1 or 2 character references with your application as well. And sometimes if you do that initially, that will bypass them asking for an interview with you later on. If folks have specific questions related to that, feel free to give me a personal call or send me an email and we can chat about that after. But I wanted to show you the application is pretty small. You know, it's just 3 pages. The last 2 pages are just information, but you'll mail this in to LARA with that $43.20. So what does submitting your application look like? The first step is mailing in that application I just showed you with $43.20. Then you wait. You wait for the state to process the application, and that will take anywhere, usually from 3 to 6 weeks. So sending it in a couple weeks before graduation usually is a good idea, because by the time it's processed, you will have graduated. And so then once the state receives your application and they process it, they will create an account for you. They will mail you a letter in the mail, which will give you, it'll basically say, we've received your application. Here's a login for our website so you can track the status of your account. You are now eligible to have your fingerprints taken and your transcript sent over. So you can't get your fingerprints taken or have your transcript sent until your application has been processed and that account has been created, if that makes sense. So in that letter, they'll also give you a link to where you can go to find fingerprinting locations, and there will be an email address listed for where EMU or wherever your school of social work is to send your transcripts directly. So you don't have to do that. Usually, probably at Eastern, like most schools, it's through the registrar's office. I don't know if any of the faculty can confirm that, but you'll put in a request for your final transcripts once those are done to be sent over to LARA. If you have been fingerprinted for whatever reason recently, you do have to be re-fingerprinted for your license. So that is going to be roughly $75. The only way you would not be re-fingerprinted is if you already have been fingerprinted for a health license. So since you all are, or most of you are bachelor's level, that wouldn't qualify for you. But sometimes if master's level folks have their LBSW, they're already in the system. So it's going to be that $43.20 and $75 fingerprinting as the initial money for this process. Once Laura has received your application, your fingerprints, and your transcripts, you will then get your limited license in the mail. What I recommend is once you have had your fingerprints taken, and the fingerprinting organization, they'll send your fingerprints right over to the state, so you don't have to do that. And once you have requested from EMU that your transcripts get sent over, I would check your online account every day, because online your license will show as activated probably a week or two before you actually get the physical license in the mail. As soon as you see on the LARA website that you have been issued a license, you can change your credentials everywhere. So make sure to add those to your resume and your cover letter, as well as your signature line. So this is kind of the first step: the application, the fingerprinting, and the transcripts. Sometimes the transcripts can be the holdup on getting this process complete, because usually it takes the schools a few weeks after graduation to finalize transcripts. So if you're wondering why I haven't got my limited license yet, I got everything else done, that's usually the holdup on it. And again, what I would do if you're applying for jobs, especially at this period, is you can just say, I've applied for my limited license. I'm waiting on my final transcripts to be sent over from Eastern. Again, by the time I'm hired into this position, I should have my limited license in hand. And that just gives them assurance that you know the process, you're on it, and that by the time they hire you in, you'll be good to go. One of the things I did want to mention as we go through this process is some ways that you might be able to get this for free. And none of this is for free. So I want to give you some potential strategies on ways you might be able to get some of this paid for. So this step here is that right around graduation time process. So first way, potential way, is if your internship is interested in hiring you. These are good questions to start having with your internship now, even if you don't want a job there, or if they don't have the capacity to hire you, is do you reimburse the licensure process? Do you have supervision for your employees on site, or do you reimburse that cost? Because for an organization, this is about $115, right? That may not be a deal breaker, especially if you've been working there for half a year, likely unpaid or low paid as an intern. That may be not a deal breaker, but for you, it may be a good chunk of money. The other thing is if it's not an internship, but just say you're applying for positions out in the field, it's critical that once you get to that negotiation phase of the interview process, that you ask questions like this. Do you have a professional development budget for your staff? And a professional development budget, while you're limited license, will include stuff like this. It will reimburse you for the licensure process, and may pay for you to get additional training that you may need, or additional credential, may pay for your membership fees and things like NASW. And especially if things are not included, is the salary high enough to make up for it not being included, right? And then the third way that I found that some people are able to get this paid for, and this is definitely not everybody, and it's a privileged statement, so I'm just gonna throw that caveat out there, is if you are graduating and you've got people in your life who are, I know for me, I was a first generation college grad, and when I was getting close to graduation, some of my family were like, hey, we're so proud of you. We'd like to get you something for graduation. What would you like? My brain was cash, cash, cash. Please give me some cash, right? As a new student. But there's some better ways that I think you can ask that. I say, will you sponsor my professional development as a social worker, or sponsor my licensure process? It sounds so much better. It's that whole thing, like your resume, your wordsmithing, right? We're learning that professional language as a social worker. And, if you got a couple folks in your family who might be willing, or friend circle that are willing to sponsor this piece for $115, I would much rather have somebody else pay for this than you. So those are kind of the three options that I have seen work in some instances for this particular piece. So, and I see there's some questions coming in, and I'll hold off on those for just a little bit as we get through some of the rest of the steps. So after you get these three pieces done, your application, your fingerprints, and your transcripts, you will get your limited license in the mail. Once you have your limited license, you are now on the track to work towards your full license. Your limited license is on a 1-year renewal. You can renew your limited license up to 6 times. So, and it's $25 per year you renew. You do not have to renew your limited license though every year. So if you find yourself working for a year out in the field and then something happens, then you're not. You might have a kid, you might be taking care of family, you might be moving, whatever happens in life and you're not working, don't renew your limited license because you only have that 6th renewal maximum to complete the limited license process. And in Michigan, that process is, again, 3 things. And I'm going to break it down into the simplest way that I can. You're going to work while you're under supervision, and you're going to pass the test. Now, for your April folks, I'm going to reorder that in a way that you can think about this, but not the December people. So sorry, December people. You're going to pass the test while you're working under supervision. So you've probably heard about the changes coming to the licensure exam process. For all of you graduating in April, as long as you have your limited license by June 30th, you will be eligible to sit and take your exam at any time during your 4,000 hours. So you could take them in July, you could take it in September. You don't have to wait until all of your hours are complete. If you don't get your license until July 1st, starting July 1, you have to have all 4,000 hours complete before you are eligible to take your exam. So for all of you April graduates, if you are planning to get a limited license, get your limited license before June 30th. That's my advice for you all, because you are going to be in this short window. Even if you're maybe not working immediately after school, but you're planning to in that first 6 months, as long as you have that limited license right away, it will make you eligible to be able to take the exam even after June 30th, where you'd have to wait until 2 years from now, really hypothetically, because 4,000 hours is 2 years of full-time work. So at the minimum, once you get your limited license, it will take you 2 years to complete that process, to go from a limited to a full license. So what does work mean? So work is anything under your scope of practice. So if you're bachelor's, it has to be bachelor's level work. If it's clinical or macro, it has to be under that area of social work. It can be paid or volunteer, or a combination of the two. So if you're working half-time at a volunteer position and half-time at a paid position, you can count both of those, and it's for 40 hours. The state requires that you have to be working a minimum of 16 hours to be able to count hours. So if you're just working for like 1 or 2 days a week for 12 hours a week, that would not count at all. It has to be at least that minimum of 16, and the most you can count per week is 40 hours a week. If you're working more than 40 hours and getting paid more than 40 hours, go for it. But in terms of your licensure process, you can only count 40 hours a week. So it will take, again, that minimum of 2 years to get to that 4,000 hour threshold that the state requires. While you are working, you have to be under supervision by an LMSW. And this is regardless if you're a bachelor's limited license or a master's limited license. Your supervisor has to be an LMSW. The only kind of difference is at the master's level, you have to have, your supervisor has to have the designation that you're going for. So if you're clinical, they have to have clinical. If you're macro, they're macro. One example of that is I supervise 2 limited licensed macro social workers outside of my role at NASW, because they are both at organizations where there are no other social workers present. And so they had to contract somebody out that offers supervision services. So I do that kind of as a side gig. For licensure process, you really should be thinking about this form of supervision as peer mentoring. This should be somebody who's not just talking to you about cases or paperwork, but this is somebody that's really talking to you about things that you're encountering as a new professional. How do you move up the agency ladder? How do you get additional training that's going to give you the expertise you need? How do you negotiate a salary bump in your job? How do you navigate the licensure process, right? There may be ethical issues you're dealing with, or advocacy issues. I know in many licensure supervision, it almost feels like professional social work therapy. So it's like, what do you need to talk about your workplace and work through that's going on at your job? And what I find is, and you probably see this in your internships, right? There's personality conflicts, there's management conflicts. And if your supervisor is your boss, you may have problems with your boss, and you may not want or be comfortable talking to them if they are your supervisor in this capacity. So it may be helpful to have somebody else that you can also run things by. You don't have to have one supervisor. You can have as many as you need to. Supervision needs to go for 1 hour per week, as long as it takes you to get 4,000 hours. So if you're working 2 years full time, it's going to take 104 hours roughly of supervision. If an organization provides supervision, that's the ideal, because then it's free. The other ideal is if they don't, they'll reimburse it. But if not, you may have to contract somebody out like the folks do with me. If that is the case, the average price we see in Michigan roughly for an hour of supervision is about $40 to $50. Now, but that is negotiable depending on who you're meeting with. Up to half of your supervision can be group. So roughly 2 of your 4 hours a month can be group supervision. The other 50% does have to be individualized, but that could add up quickly, right? Let's just do a quick math. We love math and social work. So if we're doing $50 an hour times roughly 100 hours over 2 years, that's $5,000. So that's going to be $2,500 per year that you would be paying out of your own pocket for supervision if it's not included in your salary, or if they don't reimburse it. That's $200 a month. I know for me, when I was a new social worker, even now, $200 is a lot of money to be paying for something that's not a bill. So you want to make sure that you know about the supervision piece if it's included before you accept a position. Because again, if not, does the salary make up for the fact that you're going to have to pay some amount of money out of your own pocket for this? Now, there are some supervisors that offer it for free. There are some supervisors that charge a clinical hour, or roughly $100 an hour. As a limited licensee, if you are paying out of your own pocket, never go to somebody who's charging $100 an hour. You will never, if you can find a job out of school that will allow you to pay somebody $100 an hour, I will be very proud of you, and I hope you find a job that will pay you that much. But it's, it's not the reality unless you're a doctor right out of school, and maybe not even them. But if your organization, say you work at a medical facility and other sorts of professions are billing $100 an hour for their supervision, and the organization is reimbursing that amount, absolutely get your supervisor the higher amount, right? That's a professional social worker who's offering a service to you. But if you're paying out of your own pocket, it's going to be a different set of negotiation standards. So you're just going to want to have that conversation, especially if you have to contract somebody out. NASW has a supervision registry on our website. At the end, if we have time, I'll show you that. Many faculty do licensure supervision, but this kind of goes back to that question at the beginning of, what does your social work network look like? The more people you know, the more options. If you are in an experience where you're going to need to find a supervisor, the easier it's going to be to find somebody if you already have that wide net out there. So whether that's connecting to NASW or EMU alumni groups or other social work communities, making sure that you're in those spaces. So if a case happened that you needed to find a supervisor, that it's going to be easy for you to do that. So the other piece is passing the ASWB exam. So at the bachelor's level, there's just one option, the bachelor's level test. At the master's level, we have clinical and advanced generalist in Michigan. Advanced generalist is for the macro folks. That's what I took. The exam is $230 for the bachelor's or $260 for the master's level exam. So that's usually one of the large chunks of money that has to come at one time for this process, is this exam. Now you all are about to graduate with your BSW degree. So hopefully at this point, you kind of know when you know information a lot of times, right? Like if you have to take a test, I don't know in your program if you have many exams in your bachelor's programs. I know I had a lot of writing and group projects, but in virtual space, you'll probably spend 3 to 4 months studying for this exam, because really when you think about the licensure exam, whether it's the bachelor's or the master's level exam, it covers every area of social work. And you all know social workers are everywhere. We're doing everything in every setting with every sorts of population, and every policy that exists impacts us in some way. And so this exam is really designed for you to have a basic understanding of all of the scope of social work, which makes it both easy and hard at the same time. I and most folks that I know say the closer to graduation you are, the easier the test will be. And why we say that is because the exam really tests more generalized knowledge about social work. The longer you are in the field, the more specialized you tend to be, or the more you're going to see a specific population. Say you're working with the homeless population, or you're working in child welfare. You're going to see policies and procedures that are specific to that population of social work practice. And again, you may lose some of that larger scope of the work that we're doing across the board, because you're going to have to know about theory. You're going to have to know about ethics. You're going to have to know about some advocacy and macro level stuff. So my recommendation is get the test done as soon as you can. If you are in that group that's going to be in before June, you have a little bit of time. You don't actually have to take it by June, but you won't have to wait till all of your hours are done. So this is kind of the steps while you're a limited license. You're going to be working while you're getting that supervision, and you're going to pass the test. When you finish this process, this piece here, you are going to have to submit, or your supervisor or supervisors will have to submit what's called a verification form. And that basically just says that they worked with you from this date to this date for this many total hours. And as long as those hours add up to 4,000, you're good to go. You don't have to show 4,000 hours of paycheck stubs or anything from your work that shows that you worked. However, you, as the limited licensee, want to have more documentation. So you want to have documentation of your work and your supervision, your weekly supervision. Because there are circumstances that happen that may require that you show documentation. For instance, we had somebody call us that they were getting near year 6 of their limited license, and their supervisor passed away. And they had no documentation that had happened for several years. Basically, at that point, you kind of just screwed yourself over, because there was no other social worker at the agency that could verify that supervision had happened. And since this limited licensee didn't have anything, no record of that, they weren't able, they had to basically start over on their hours for, if they had time. I can't remember what exactly happened with this person. But what I recommend is 2 things as it relates to supervision. You should have a contract that you have between you and your supervisor, even if your organization provides it. Because there are things that happen within organizations. People get fired, you get fired, the supervisor gets fired, people end up having toxic relationships at work. Something weird could, somebody dies, right? Where the supervisor goes MIA or refuses to sign off on your paperwork. But if you have a contract, that should lay out, when are you meeting? What's the pay arrangement, even if it's free? Do you require liability insurance? And do you require that your supervisor sign off on your hours at the end, even if they don't think you're ethically ready to practice? Because the state, all they want is the verification form. They don't actually care if anybody thinks that you're good and ready to go. Hopefully by 2 years of supervision, anything's been worked out if there are issues. We have templates for both a weekly supervision log and a contract on our supervision page of our website, which I'll show you in a bit. But you can kind of create whatever works best for you. You know, if a Google Sheet works best for a log, go with that. But you want to have, I say, at least monthly, your supervisor should sign off on something as well as you should sign off on something, at least initial. That's what I do with my 2 limited licensees. Is once a month, when they pay me, I sign off and say, we met this date for this many hours. And that's really it. You don't really need details about what you talked about, as long as you can show that record. If there was a worst case scenario, that person was no longer available to sign your paperwork. I had a limited licensee call me about a month ago, and they left an organization because it was a toxic environment for them, and their supervisor refused to sign off on their paperwork, right? And there was really nothing they could do. They didn't have other documentation that had happened, and so they were trying to figure out with Laura some alternatives, or if they would have to start over. But this, if you have some of that backup documentation for yourself, it will negate any of those potential issues, which are very slim. They don't happen that often, but I want you all to be prepared for the worst case if whatever reason it happens. All right, so once you complete your exam, your hours, and your supervision, what will happen is you have to apply for your full license. So again, you'll go to the licensing Laura website, and you will complete, basically it's just a different checkbox on the same application. Full license at either the bachelor's level or the master's level, and your supervisor or supervisors will have to send in those verification forms. Let me see if this actually links. Yes, it does. Okay, so you'll see again on that Laura page, supervision, verification, let's see, bachelor's level license. So this one pager, this is all that your supervisor needs to fill out. You don't fill it out, your supervisor does. And the other thing that you also want though is when your supervisor mails this into Laura, make sure they have a copy of it and that you get a copy of it, because things happen and people say, oh, I mailed that a month ago, or I mailed that over the summer and it's not showing up yet. And then they go on vacation and you never see them again or hear from them again. So ask for a copy, even if it's a digital copy, when they submit it to the state. So that's going to be what the supervision verification form looks like through there. So once you submit the full licensure application and your supervision verification form, and your test scores, as soon as you pass your test, ASWB will send your test scores right over to the state. So you don't have to worry about that. That's already done for you. The application for the full license is $43.20. So there's another fee. But once you complete this, you will get your full license in the mail. You all are going to be entering the field at a slightly transition time for Laura. So starting in the fall, Laura is changing their website. So likely when you apply for your full LBSW or your full LMSW, whenever that may be, you will actually be able to do that online. Right now, you have to print it off and mail it in. So hopefully once you get to the next step, it will be a little bit easier. So you don't actually have to print. I don't even have a printer at home, like most people don't anymore. So there's some good changes coming at the state level. So just make sure that you're kind of aware of those changes as they happen over the next year or two, because you're going to kind of be in the middle. You'll probably start with paper and end with online renewal. So just be aware that that's going to be happening. Once you get your full license, at the bachelor's level, there's only one license. So there's nowhere else to go, or there's nothing to add on. At the master's level, if you want to add on the second designation, you can. It's just half of the requirements. So one more year of full-time work under supervision, and you have to pass the second exam if somebody does want to add that on there. Once you get your full license, that's when your continuing education starts. So as a limited licensee, you do not have to do continuing education. 0 hours of continuing education as a limited licensed person. As a limited licensed person, though, you do have to attend a human trafficking training. So this will be by your first renewal of your limited license. So for those of you, let's just say you April graduates get your license May 1st. That's actually perfect because all health licenses as of right now renew May 1st to April 30th. So your first limited license renewal will be May 1st of 2022. By that date, you will need to have attended a human trafficking training. Now, I know you all are at Eastern. If you've taken a Dave Manville course on human trafficking, that will likely already count. So you may be done with it. If you haven't taken a human trafficking training, by that first renewal, you will have to complete one. For you December graduates, things are also changing. So starting December 22nd, if you are applying for your limited license, you will have to show, or you will have to have your human trafficking training done before you actually apply for your limited license. So it's some changes are happening in that. So for you December people, you're going to want to get your human trafficking training done between now and December. For you people graduating in April, you actually have a whole year. So it's a weird year. Again, just the timing is a little bit tricky for folks. Once you get your full license, whether that's the LBSW or the LMSW, that's when the continuing education will start, and you have to get 45 hours in your 3-year cycle. By the time you all will have your full license, it will be 5 hours of ethics, 2 hours of pain management, and 2 hours of human trafficking will be CE requirements. And for some of you, that's going to be a couple of years from now. So again, this is something you're going to want to make sure that you keep up to date with, because things do change every few years. The human trafficking is going to be brand new for people, and it should be state law. Could be anytime this week, actually. We're just waiting on the Great Seal of Michigan to sign off on it, but it's gone through all the legislative process, or the policy process in the state. But there may be there's some changes around implicit bias coming through that may be a continuing education in the future. But for you all, what we know is going to be, at least for when you get your full license, is ethics, pain, and human trafficking. So this will be the last slide before I take a break for questions. So I say a shout out for Dave Manville in the chat box. Good. So as we wrap up the licensure process itself, I want to do a financial recap, the happy face and the sad face, because it's reality, and I think we need to talk about money. So the happy face is the lowest possible amount that this may cost, generally. So you've got your initial application, $43.20, your fingerprinting, roughly $75. You're going to have to renew your limited license one time at least, so that's $25. You'll have to take your exam, $230 or $260, and you'll have to apply for your full license, $43.20. So at the low end, it's going to be about $450 over 2.5, 3 years, depending on how long it takes you to get your hours. That's not terrible, because it's a couple of years, it's spread out. That exam is that large chunk at one time, that one hurts, but the rest is slower, and hopefully you'll be working in a position at that point. But that assumes that a lot of stuff is covered, right? That supervision's covered. You're not taking the licensure prep course. You're only renewing your limited license one time. And so when we get over to the sad face, you still got your application fee. You still have your fingerprinting. You've got your renewal, which could be up to 6 times. If you go all 6 renewals and you don't pass your exam, your hours haven't been complete, or you haven't finished supervision, that is a maximum cap on time. So you would not be able to remain licensed in Michigan. You could, in theory, move to a different state and start their licensure process, but that is a 6-year cap. So that's, again, why I said at the beginning, if you are not working for whatever reason, do not continue to renew your limited license, because you could go a year and then take 5 years off. And then when you come back, you still have 5 renewals left, as long as you weren't renewing that entire time. So just make sure you're aware of your own hours and situation. But so you've got your exam. That fee is times however many times it takes you to do it. But I'm going to say for everybody on this call, it's going to be one time. It's going to be a one and done. You're going to get that test done on the first time. I'd say on average exam prep costs $200 to $250 if you take a course. There are some resources, there are apps you can do, and we'll merge into the exam here shortly. But on average, that's probably what a prep course costs. And then you see this large number for supervision. This really is the difference that you need to know about before you accept a position. Because again, if we're in that $40 to $50 average times 100, that's the 5,000 line. And if somebody's charging $100 for supervision an hour for 2 years, that's $10,000 or $400 a month that potentially supervision can cost. So it's really critical that you know before you accept a position if supervision is included or reimbursed in that job. Many large social work organizations already include supervision. And I would guess that probably many of the places that you all intern include supervision. And it would be good to go back and ask too if you don't know. And then you have your final application. So we went from about $450 at the low end to $6,000 to $11,000. Like that's a pretty big difference, right? And the difference is supervision for the most part. Most people only need to take the exam one time. We'll talk about that after I answer a few questions. But you know, I want to make sure that you all are in this happy face category if you have to pay anything out of your own pocket. The ideal is your organization is going to be reimbursing everything and you're good to go. But if not, I at least want you to be at this $450 versus the $6,000, because you should probably, unless the salary is really high, $6,000 high or $5,000 high for that supervision cost, you may not be able to accept that job if you got to pay that out of your own pocket. All right, so we're hosting our Licensure Exam Institute. It's a virtual on May 2nd. So if anybody is thinking that they want to take their exam over the summer, this would be a great time to hop into that course. It comes with a physical book. You get an online platform and an app for that. But there's some other options out there too. This is just one that we host that I want to make sure people knew about. But I'm going to pause here before we move specifically into the exam, and I will check through the chat, but also feel free to unmute your line if you have questions. Okay, one question from McKenna, just to clarify, I do not need to apply for my LLBSW if I'm going straight through to my MSW, correct? So yes, McKenna, assuming you're not working in a social work job on top of your MSW internship. If you're going to be working in a social work position, a bachelor's level position, you would need to have your limited license. There's very few MSW internships that would require that you have an LBSW or an LLBSW. Angie, did you have a question? I see you popped up. Okay. Let's see what else we got here. What if we're working at an agency with our BSW and pursuing a master's? Do I want to apply for my license and then upgrade it to attain my MSW? So that's a good question, Ken. So if you are already working or you're going to be working with your bachelor's level license, what will happen is once you graduate with your MSW, it's a different set of pot of hours. So basically you start over again with your MSW license because it's a different scope of practice. It's a different exam. It's a different 6 set years of renewal. It's just a different license. So once you get your LLMSW, you can basically let your bachelor's level license lapse. You don't need to keep renewing that and paying that fee because the master's level license will supersede that. I see just a little bit of confusion about the supervision hours. So it will be 104, not 140 hours of supervision. Sorry if I said that wrong. So there's 52 weeks in a year. It's going to take a minimum of 2 years. So if you're working full time, it'll be 104 hours. Now, we know that there are weeks that you may be off for being sick or vacation or whatever. There may be weeks that you have 2 hours of supervision, or there may be a week that you don't have supervision. Things happen, right? Supervision can be virtual, can be in person. Right now, everything's virtual. I know with my limited licensees, before the pandemic, for one of them, we would get bubble tea every week and go on a walk and do supervision or go to Big B. And then the other one is virtual because they live in a different part of the state. So we always either do phone or Zoom, and that's perfectly okay with supervision. And with your supervisor, the only other thing I'll say about that is make sure it's somebody you like, because this is somebody you've got to talk to an hour a week for at least 2 years. So you want it to be somebody you trust, somebody who you can give you good guidance, who's connected to the social work field, right? That has some expertise in your area. They don't have to be doing the exact work that you're doing, but they should have competence in the area that you are in. Supervision really is really critical. It's because, again, that mentoring piece, and as a limited licensee, I almost view that as like the training wheels phase of social work. It's like those first 2 years, you got your supervisor or your parent holding on to you as you ride the bike with your training wheels, and you're learning all about how not to fall off or make mistakes. And then once they give you their expertise and you kind of get your feet wet in the field, then they let you go and you're on your own. Question from Eric: are we able to take the MSW exam before we get the hours we need after graduation? So for either the bachelor's level or the master's level, if you graduate in April and get your limited license immediately before June 30th, you will be eligible or made eligible to take your exam at any time between then and your 4,000 hours. So you could take it May 15th, you could take it a year from now. Starting July 1, if you get your license after July 1, you have to wait until all of your hours are complete. So the April people, you're in a nice boat because you're going to have a little bit more opportunity. You December folks, you're going to have to wait 2 years after your December graduation to take your exam. Let's see. Do they allow any accommodations for the exam? Yes, there are accommodations that you can request. You will want to do that when you pay for your exam, and you just specify which specific accommodations that you are requesting. I know that they've got language options. You can have the test read to you, additional time, that sort of thing. And we'll talk about the exam here shortly. If you work separately from your internship during your MSW, one second, Andrea, sorry. If you work separately from your internship during your MSW, could you use hours for your license? So if you have your LLBSW and you are working in a bachelor's level position on top of your internship, you could absolutely count those hours for your bachelor's level license. If you are in your master's level program, you cannot count any hours towards a master's level license until after you graduate and have your limited license at the master's level. So you could go with a license level that's lower than your current academic, but you couldn't go forward. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, Andrea, sorry, did I cut you off? I just got unmuted. Oh, Victoria asks, how do you make sure it's a good fit? So I'm guessing that's related to supervision. Now, we're all social workers here. We're relationship people. You'll probably know pretty quickly if your supervisor is a good fit. The trickier part will be is if your organization provides you somebody and they're not a good fit, and that's the only person that they'll pay for free. You kind of have two options. Stick it out, and you may have to do a lot of self-advocacy to get what you want out of it. And maybe find some mentorship outside of that relationship, or you may want to find a contractual person to do supervision separately. Because you may have somebody whose job title is supervisor that every week you meet with them to talk about cases or paperwork, but that may be a different person who's been doing your licensure supervision, because that person needs to be talking to you about a broader scope of things. Go ahead, Devin. See your hand raised.
So I'm planning on going straight into MSW program. I can sign up for the limited license and then be able to take that exam before I graduate MSW program?
No, you can't apply for a master's license until you'll have a master's degree.
Oh, okay.
You could apply for a bachelor's license and
Okay.
finish that process. But if you're going right into an MSW program, you're not going to want to apply for a license likely.
Okay.
Kara asked, how similar is all of this information to Ohio? Mildly similar. I don't even know if Ohio has a bachelor's level license, to be honest. I don't think that they do. So licensing is going to be a little bit different. Even the letters that you use. Ohio, we have the LLBSW and the LLMSW, clinical and macro. Ohio doesn't have those letters. They have the LSW and the LCSW. And I'm not 100% sure about the bachelor's level, but that's where I would recommend calling the Ohio chapter of NASW if you're thinking of moving. You'll probably talk to either Colleen or Danielle there, but just say, hey, I'm moving from Michigan to Ohio after graduation. What do I need to know there? Because it is going to be a little bit different. So kind of along those lines from Margaret, can you get your LLBSW in Michigan and work somewhere at the bachelor's level, but then apply to get your full license in Ohio? Assuming whatever state you move to has the equivalent license, yes, they should be able to carry over hours and supervision. And the test would carry over because the ASWB, they administer the test for all 50 states. So if you took a bachelor's test here, it would carry over to any state that uses that bachelor's test. If you took the clinical or the macro, as long as that state has the same exam, that would carry over. The only caveat is some states at the master's level, they have a third category of test that's called masters. So there's master's, clinical, and advanced generalist at the ASWB. Those are the three options for master's level folks. We do not use the master's exam here in Michigan. So just making sure that if you are moving to a different state, that it's transferable. And the worst case is your hours and your supervision and all of that should carry over, but you may have to take a different test. So that would kind of be the worst case. Any other questions before kind of moving on to, I know we got until 5, right? Yeah, so the exam, I'll talk a little bit about the exam next. Okay, so this is just another resource for exam prep. This is an online class that we recommend. This is specifically designed for non-traditional students. This was a social worker in her 50s who did not pass on the first time. And so traditional study methods did not work for her. So she kind of designed her own course and has her own team. What I like about Pass It Pro is specifically if you are somebody who does a lot better with kind of one-on-one coaching, they have options for that as it relates to this exam. So talking about, before we just get into the exam itself, I did want to mention we are having a virtual career fair on March 30th. So if you are looking for jobs, and if you are potentially looking for jobs all over the US, this is going to be a national virtual career fair. It's free from 10 to 4. So make sure your resume and your LinkedIn's, if you don't have them, are up to date by then. We are also in Michigan hosting a student town hall on March 22nd from 5:30 to 7 on navigating the job market after graduation. It's going to be on Zoom and likely Facebook Live, but you can sign up for that on the NASW-Michigan website. That's open to anybody. And we're going to be having Michelle Woods, who runs the Career Services Office at the U of M School of Social Work, talking about what she's specifically seeing as it relates to the job market during a pandemic. I will say for you April graduates, the good news is, at least from what I'm seeing at NASW's level end, is hiring is rebounding. I would say there was a good 4 months where there was like very few places hiring at the beginning of the pandemic. I think everyone was just figuring out how to work in a virtual space, and we're starting to see a lot of those jobs become reopened again. The other thing we're starting to see is there was quite a bit of retirement that happened during the pandemic. Maybe people didn't want to deal with just switching to virtual worlds, or they were just getting near the end of their career, but we're seeing many more sort of management level and macro level positions open up across organizations. So this is a good time, surprisingly, I think, to be entering the field in some capacities. And so we want to make sure that as you start applying for jobs, that you all have the best resumes, the best talking points, and you kind of know what you need to get those jobs out of school. So I just wanted to quickly mention those particular events. There's a job market one. And well, yeah, we had those two a couple weeks ago. But we also have our Social Work Student of the Year Awards on March 31st. I don't know off the top of my head who Eastern students are, but you will have both a BSW and an MSW student who will be honored at that event. And that is every school of social work in the state of Michigan gets one student from their program who is nominated to receive our statewide award every year. So if you'd like to join us for that, that'll be on March 31st. I'll put my information at the end. So let's switch into the exam now, because I think that's probably going to bring up a few more questions. For all of the events, feel free, if you want to just check out NASW-Michigan.org, that will bring you to any of the options for today. I'll try to remember at the end, Abby, if I don't get back to you, just remind me. So the exam itself. The exam is owned by ASWB. They write the questions. You will take your exam at a Pearson testing site. You will choose a location and time that fits your schedule. They have times every day of the week, morning, noon, night. So whatever works best for you. The test is 170 question multiple choice exam. Not super fun. As a standardized test, of the 170, 150 count. So 20 of the questions they're testing if they want to keep on for future exams. You don't know which 20 those are. Hopefully those are the ones you got wrong, but 20 of them are going to be kind of tossed out. And then every test is weighted differently, but on average, you'll have to pass 75% of the questions. So like they were testing those 20 questions before, every question is weighted. So your test may have a 70% pass rate or a 75% pass rate. You won't know that until you're done. And it will tell you if you pass or you don't pass. And it'll say, this is the number you needed. But when you are studying, you should probably be averaging around an 80% passing score. That's what I would feel comfortable with, or what I did feel comfortable with when I was studying. Because if you're at like a 65 or even a 70, you may want to pay that extra money and attend a prep course or something like that, just to make sure it bumps you over into that passing score. You get 4 hours to take the exam. It, on average, takes about 2.5 to 3 hours. I think that was about right for what it took me. Probably the best thing, maybe the only good thing about this exam, is you are notified immediately if you've passed. So you'll get to question 170 and you'll see that submit button in the corner and you'll be real nervous. I know I was, and I'll be like, okay, I'm gonna hit that button. And then I'll say, are you sure? And you'll be like, stop asking me this. And I'll ask you like 3 times, are you really sure? And you'll think you'll be done, but no, because we're social workers, there'll be like an 8-question evaluation, because we love evaluation in social work. And then after that evaluation is done, it will either say congratulations or something like needs further study. So we're going to say it's congratulations, but either way, you're going to cry or you're going to cry, depending on how it goes. Give yourself some self-care after your exam, whether it goes good or not great. If you do not pass, ask for a detailed printout of your score. Regardless, you will get a printout. I had mine in my office for a while, but it basically is a 1-pager. It'll have your picture on it. They'll take your picture when you go into your testing site. So if you care what you look like, it's basically from the waist up, and that will be sent to the state of Michigan as well. And it will say this person needed this amount out of this amount, and they got this score. Hopefully it'll say congratulations, but if it doesn't, you can ask for a slightly more detailed report, which will tell you what areas you specifically needed to improve on for your exam. So that can be helpful for folks as they take the exam. Note that if you are going to try to schedule your exam sometime in the near-ish future, with COVID, it's a little bit strange, right? Because they're not at full capacity at all their sites. So some of the sites I know are backed up already until like June in terms of scheduling. So you may have to wait a couple of months to schedule your exam. So that's for you April graduates. At least if you have your license before June, even if you can't get a date scheduled before the end of June, you'll be able to schedule later on without a problem. And with COVID, that will be likely the case. If you're on the border, or if you're one of those like Ohio folks, you could take your exam in Ohio. If there was a testing site that's closer, maybe your Toledo's closer than a site to you than somewhere in Michigan, you can take your site. It doesn't have to be in Michigan. Or if you're maybe living remotely right now, you could take your exam in a different state if you need to. For the exam, you will see kind of two types of questions: direct questions or statements, and then case vignettes. So those will just give you a little scenario and ask you a question or two about that. You're always going to see, and you'll probably hate these sort of words, what should the social worker do first? Or what is the best answer for this, blah, blah, blah. What that means is there are 1, 2, 3, or 4 correct answers. Think about yourself, again, in this exam, as you are not a social worker in Ypsilanti, Michigan, working at a domestic violence shelter. You are not a social worker in Ann Arbor at a community mental health. You are not a social worker in Detroit, Michigan at a child welfare organization. You are Jane Addams in the middle of a cornfield in Iowa, ready to do any type of social work, ready, go. That's you. So you're going to see scenarios that you're like, oh, I had that exact thing happen at my work. No, you didn't. What did the general social worker anywhere in the United States have if this was their situation? Because your agency may have a specific policy that may be different from what a social worker anywhere would do. So that can be sometimes the tricky part when studying for this exam, is remember, you want to think in that generalist outline. It's not what are you going to do in your job. It's what would a social worker anywhere do in this particular case. There's going to be questions around ethics. You're going to have some questions around client safety. Note that you can flag questions on this exam. So on your computer, you can check a box and you can say, I want to come back here. Make sure you check an answer for every question, because you don't want to run out of time and realize you left 10 questions blank and then you failed by 1 question. So just make sure you're at least checking an option while you go through here. What I've seen from folks who struggle with this exam, it's usually much more to do with anxiety than content. So if you know that you are an anxious test taker, for those of you, if you're around Eastern, U of M has a really good anxiety clinic that has some focus around test anxiety, because I would much rather you have some strategies to deal with that may cost you $100 than having to pay $230 3 times, right? So making sure that you have the right strategies to get through this exam. The exam is going to look at 3 types of information: recall questions, which are going to be descriptions and definitions; applications, so this is like rules, laws, and concepts, and we'll do an example of at least one of these, and then reasoning, so that is going to be less on the bachelor's level exam, but that's like your own judgment and analysis. In Michigan, our pass rates are about 70% for first-time test takers across the board. Our bachelor's pass rate is actually a tiny bit higher than the national average, and our clinical rate is lower than the national average. So we're working with the schools to try to figure out how we can get that one specifically a little bit higher. But we want to make sure that you are, as many of you as possible, are in that first-time test taker pass rate. Because what we know is if you have to take the test more than 1 time, that's usually when the anxiety doubles, right? If I've already failed it once, it's going to bring that extra layer of anxiety on there. And you can see the repeat scores are a little bit lower, quite a bit lower for that. But 70%, 3 out of 4 is pretty good for a standardized test, but obviously we want to make sure as many people are passing this on the first time as possible. So let's just do a couple of, at least one sample question. I think one is probably what we're going to have time for. So this is a good one, because this is one that would potentially be on the bachelor's level. The largest number of persons receiving public assistance in most states are single mothers, children less than 18, unemployed fathers, or aged individuals. So this is what we call a recall question, because this is actually a definition question. So we're specifically looking at, when I look through these questions, you want to pull out those keywords. And here, there are really 2 things that are key. largest number, right? And public assistance. What is public assistance? And that is the definition we're trying to kind of know to be able to figure out the answer. So I'm curious, what are some thoughts about this one? You can either type into the chat box what you think the answer might be, or if anybody's brave enough to open up their line and tell me what they're thinking.
I think aged individuals,
And what makes you think aged individuals?
because it's a community of individuals and not a specific subtype, I guess.
Okay. So that's D. I see quite a bit of A. Anybody in the A group want to give a shot about why you think A?
I think it could be A because public assistance usually is for single mothers, but then it counts the children as well. So it's kind of hard between A and B.
A and B. So A, that's also kind of the stereotype of what we think of as, you know, welfare, right? The single mother on, but your point of, oh, the kids are also covered under there. So nobody said C, so we're going to just cut unemployed fathers out. So now we're down to A, B, and C. And nobody, I think one person, Margaret, said B in the comment. We look at D, so that was our first comment. So public assistance, I see Social Security, Medicaid. So this is where knowing definitions is going to be critical. Because what's the difference between a public assistance and an entitlement program? Those are not the same. So Social Security is an entitlement program. So that does not count towards public assistance. And so D is not the correct answer for this question. So now we're down to A and B. And I think where, sorry, I missed whose name it was, but when you talk about a single mother may have more than one kid, that's where you can sometimes break this out as yes. And actually about 70% of public assistance goes to children. So you think of TANF, right, or food benefits, right, all of those things. So 70% is actually goes towards children less than 18. But if you are like a gerontologist social worker, D is going to seem like the right answer because that's going to be the area you're in. But when you kind of broaden it out and really think about, okay, yep, a single mother, that's what we hear about, right? That's what the news carries. But those parents could have 3 kids, 4 kids, right? And each one of those is a separate assistance. So B is going to be your correct answer for this question. It's tricky reading through some of these. You really got to, you probably won't feel amazing when you start studying for this. I know I was like, I didn't learn anything in school. What was my MSW good for? But I'll give you some reassurance. You will have probably 40 to 50% of this you will know already. And then there'll be another 50%. You're like, yeah, I might have had a chapter of that in my book, or no, we didn't talk about that much in my program. There's going to be pieces of this because, again, this covers all areas of social work that you're really going to have to hone in on. But you're going to have some real competence in other places already to start. So I'm just going to skip through a couple other questions just because for time. Make sure you, if you're on Facebook, like the NASW-Michigan Facebook page because we post questions on there fairly regularly. But some tips: know where you're going on your exam day. Your time starts whether you're there or not, so be there. Make sure your name that is on your ID matches how you registered for your exam. So if you get married, divorced, something was spelled wrong, make sure it is synced up before you go to your space because you don't want them to turn you away for any reason. Maybe the most important tip is if it doesn't say it, don't assume it. This is going to be real hard because there's going to be 1 to 2 sentences, and that's all the information that they provide to you. Every question, pretty much in your brain, you will want a magic button that you can push that's going to give you another paragraph of presenting information. That will never happen. You only get the 1 to 2 sentences, so only read what is in the question. So again, if your brain automatically goes, oh yeah, I had that scenario in my internship and we did this and this and this. well, does it say this and this and this in the question? Because if not, those things do not apply to this question. Only read the little bit of information that they have said is enough to answer this question. So I know for me, once I kind of realized that and that generalized knowledge, that helped me kind of as I was looking through questions. And the more sample questions you see, the easier it will be to understand how they kind of word this, especially if it's been a little while since you've done a standardized test. I know for me, I think like the ACT was the last one I had taken before this. So it had been quite a while. It's not an exam you can procrastinate on studying for, I hate to tell you. You're probably going to want to give yourself a good 2 to 4 months of slow studying. If you take a prep course, drag a friend, get a study buddy, because you're going to pick up different things if you go to the same prep course and have somebody that can help keep you accountable. Pay for your exam. Once you pay for your exam and choose your date, it will force you to study. I can't tell you how many people will say, oh, I'm gonna take my exam in June, and then June comes, and then August comes, and then December comes, and then January comes.
Like most places it's included. I'm like,
oh, sorry, it's like somebody's line's open.
oh, not happening.
1 second, let me see if I can find who that is real quick.
I'm not gonna get my license anyways, probably.
All right, I think I found it. All right, so I don't know if Eastern has any specific prep courses or prep options, but check in with your program to see. They may have some stuff at the library on campus. Lindsay, go ahead. I see your hand raised.
So I have physical disability, and I have at school special accommodations for tests and stuff. And I know this is on a computer, but I was just like kind of saying as precautions. Is there any accommodations when taking the test? You know, just in case if I do need that little extra time or whatever, will I be penalized for that?
You, as long as you notify them before when you schedule your exam, you shouldn't have any problem with that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Devin. Good. Okay. All right. So just a couple of resources. Go to your app store on your phone. There will be, put in social work exam, be it LMSW exam, whatever exam you're planning to take. There will be some options that range from maybe free, but probably no more than $15. Note though that any app that exists, none of them are created by ASWB themselves. So they won't be exactly the same questions that you'll find on your exam, but they're usually similar and will give you at least a starting point to see what questions look like. I know I really enjoyed at least having some sort of like a time frame. If I had 15 minutes in my day, I could just say, oh, I'm going to put 15 minutes on this timer. I'm going to try to get through this many questions. And some of the apps will even let you tailor. I only want to do ethics questions. I only want to do theory questions. And so you can really even hone what areas you want to specifically focus in. Don't throw out your textbooks, at least not all of them. If you've got textbooks, you probably at least want a copy of the Code of Ethics, a theory book. Those two are going to be, regardless of your bachelor's or master's level, you'll have questions about that. But you probably won't need to buy any other books, like social work books, unless you take a prep course. Then those are helpful because there's sample tests and they'll give you guidance on what sort of content areas you want to look at. But the thing about this exam that I put on the bottom of the slide is like, you just want to pass. You just want to see that congratulations on your screen. You don't usually get a bonus. You're not in a competition with a coworker. You just want to get through that exam and see that congratulations. What I will say though is, as you're negotiating your contract as a limited licensee, you may want to ask right away, is there an incentive or a raise once I complete my licensure process? And if they say yes, make sure that that is in writing somewhere. So I'll tell you, I've heard people say, my agency said when I got my full license there, I'd get a 5% raise. And then when that happens, oh, we didn't say that, or we said that, but now we can't do that. Get it in writing, make sure it's somewhere for that. So I think that's my last slide on kind of this process. And I think we're kind of right at time. So are there any other questions that folks have before we kind of wrap things up for today? I hope this was helpful. at least put you in the right direction. Let me just pull up my contact information again. So if anybody has questions, they can feel free to either email me or give me a call. If you're interested in joining NASW, please feel free to go to socialworkers.org. If you are either not graduating this year or are going into an MSW program, we are currently recruiting students for our board of directors, and we have an MSW level position and a BSW student board rep, and we would love to have some Eastern students. I think it's been a few years since we've had an EMU person on that. So feel free to check that out on our website. But we're a tiny team. We're a staff of 6 here in Michigan for the 29,000 licensed folks and the 6,500 students. 3 of the 6 of us are social workers. So also why we need you and we want you as a member, so we can hear what you need, what you want. It's a crazy time to be a social worker. So I'm so proud of y'all for making through this last year. I'm sure you're ready to be done here in the next couple of months, and we're ready to have you in the field. So I'll stay on for if anybody has any last minute questions, and this recording will probably be up on the NASW-Michigan YouTube channel if folks want to listen to it again at a later point too.
Thank you, Duane, very, very much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. It's good to see everybody.
I have a question.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mara.
So I didn't get your answer. I said, so do we have to have 4,000 hours within 3 years?
No. So you have to get 4,000 hours to be able to go from a limited to a full license, but you have 6 renewals of your limited license maximum to get that 4,000 hours. So it could take you 2 years if you're working full time. It could take you that maximum of 7 years if you're working part time that whole time. But it really it fluctuates depending on how you're working and how many hours you're working. But I'd say on average it takes between 2 and 3 years for folks to finish their 4,000 hours.
And then what was the name of the app again?
So we didn't put a specific app on there. If you just go into your app store, if you have an iPhone, go to your app store and just put in either bachelor's social work exam or clinical or advanced generalist. That'll bring up the options. And I would just poke around and see which ones maybe are cheap or free. Start there. And then if you want to get a little bit more complex, I think the most expensive apps are going to be maybe $15. But also if you're thinking about taking like a prep course like ours in May, you also get an app with that, so you may not want to invest any extra money if you're already going to plan on doing a course that includes it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Yeah, I actually have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So since I'm graduating in April, and I plan on working for a little while and then getting my master's, you recommended just to get my limited license or to just wait?
So if you're going to be doing social work in that in between, absolutely get your limited license. The real difference is if you know you're going to go back for your MSW, it may not make sense to take your exam because you're not going to finish that bachelor's process. And so as soon as you get into your MSW program, that bachelor's level license, you'll likely just let lapse. And then once you finish your MSW, you'll start the LMSW process.
Okay. And then for my supervisor, so during that process, when I do have my limited license, should I start working on hours then or?
Yeah, so as soon as you get your limited license, you can start collecting supervision hours and work hours.
Okay. All right. And then my supervisor has to have an LMSW or?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
So, yeah, while you talk about supervision, I just did want to show folks. So under the NASW-Michigan website, which is just NASW-Michigan.org, if you go under member benefits, you'll see find a supervisor. And on that tab, there'll be information around supervision, including a contract template, a weekly supervision log. You can use these or tweak them or kind of use them as a reference and make up your own topics to talk about, some competency standards. And then our registration list is listed by county. So these are folks that we have trained that we know have some competence in supervision that you could find if you needed to find somebody in your area. And then you can, contact them directly and you can see kind of their scope of practice and expertise as well.
Do you recommend a book to study for the exam?
Okay, so from Duane's experience, when I studied for this exam at the macro level, there was 0 macro books available and 0 macro anything. I took my exam in like 2015 or 2014. My personal favorite now, after I've been in the field, I took MSU's 2-day prep course. I took the Passive Pro course when I was studying. And now that I've been at NASW, I have gone through Dawn Apgar's training. I think Dawn Apgar's is the most comprehensive for social workers, at least on my end. So I like her material. APGAR is her name. She has a bachelor's of clinical and an advanced generalist book. She also helps, she does our 1-day course as well. But why I like hers is it's not content focused. It's how do you read the questions? How do you analyze how the test is formatted? Because that really is the trick. Like, you're all done with a bachelor's degree. You know how to get information, right? That's usually not the struggle that most folks have. It's really understanding what are they asking for me in this question, and how do I analyze the 4 answers that are associated with that question. So I particularly liked hers. But there are quite a lot out there. So just make sure that if you are looking at prep courses, it's coming from a reputable organization, because there are people out there that just will pay for a seminar that's just them talking about their experience with the exam, which I don't particularly find helpful. And I want to make sure that you all are getting the maximum out of that. But the schools of social work that have prep materials, those are usually pretty solid as well.
Thank you.
Welcome. All right, see this question from Carly. Can we use our supervision hours we got during our internship towards our hours of our LBSW? No. No hours count until you have your limited license, and nothing that you did as it related to your academic degree counts towards your licensure hours.
I have another question. So I think someone has said something similar. So if we wanted to, like, so we graduate in April, some of us graduate in April. So should we just, because I start my master's in August, so should I just wait to do all of this process and stuff until after I graduate?
Likely. It's going to depend on, again, are you going to try to get a bachelor's level job in that in between or while you're in your MSW program? If the answer is no, you're just going to go right into your MSW program and maybe work something else on the side, then you wouldn't need your LLBSW.
So would you recommend that I just wait until after I graduate with the bachelor's, or?
With your master's?
Yeah.
Again, it depends on what your plan is. If you're not going to work in a position that requires a bachelor's level license, you don't get it. Don't spend that money. But if you are going to have an LBSW or an LLBSW job while you're in your MSW program, you will want to have it.
Okay.
All right. Well, if folks think of things that come up later, feel free to email me outside of this at any time. Like I said, this will be up on the NASW-Michigan website. I'm just going to quickly put, again, the resource link into the chat box. So make sure you just keep a copy of this link. It has most of the handouts for today, as well as some additional resources. And as the rules change around continuing education, we'll make sure that it also gets updated either on the NASW-Michigan website or in that particular drive. So just check back if things change. But I want to thank you all for being here tonight and taking a couple hours out of your Wednesday with me. Congratulations for all you April graduates. December graduates got a few more months, so hold in there. You're almost there. And if you need any other support between now and graduation, don't hesitate to reach out at any time. So thanks, everyone.